Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Real inspiration for real innovators. If you're looking for innovation and leadership transformation, your journey starts now.
Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Bourne. Look, if you've been enjoying Innovation Insights, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so others like you can find these episodes. Ensure that you follow the podcast and stay informed of trends, strategies, and real-world examples of how today's innovators and leaders are guiding innovation. Well, today we have a really special guest. She is not new to the podcast. She was with us last season and she's back. It's Robyn Bolton, and she has her brand new book out, which we're going to talk about today. She is the founder of Mile Zero, and she has a incredible background in innovation. So I can't wait to dive in to this hot off the press book. So hello, Robyn. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you. It's great to be back.
Well, let's dive in because I'm really, really excited for us to be able to offer our listeners another innovation guide, right? Kind of a field guide for innovation that they can get into their hands. My first question is like, why now? What caused you to finally say, okay, I'm going to sit down and write this book? And what was so important in the book? What were some of the messages that you felt like people must know, must read?
Yeah, so for a long time, I resisted writing a book because the world does not need another innovation book. There are so many amazing innovation books out there, like yours, that it's been covered. And still in the back of my mind, I had this thing that's been kind of gnawing at me. And that little gnawing voice has been getting louder and louder, which has been asking, hey, The Innovator's Dilemma
Mhm.
was published in the late 90s. And that's almost 30 years ago.
Gosh.
The results of innovation investments by corporations, the results they're seeing have not changed in 30 years. And so really all that's happened over that time frame is we kind of have the growing of what I lovingly called the innovation industrial complex. You have all the consultants and the books and the articles and the workshops and all of that, of which I'm a part of. So I'm not no side eye on them, but the results haven't changed. So we must be missing something. And what is that something? And in reflecting on the work that I've done with leaders across all different types of companies, I realized that we've been taking this kind of siloed approach to corporate innovation. You
Mhm.
know, Typically what we focus on are the very, what I would say, left-brained businessy things. What is the strategy, the process, the structures, the governance, the metrics, all of those things, which are important, but alone they're not sufficient for innovation success. On the other hand, you have a lot of companies who say, we want to build a culture of innovation. And culture is, we don't have a little bottle of culture that we can pour into the water fountains and be like, ta-da, now you have a culture of innovation. It takes so long and, repetition and all that. So focusing on building a culture isn't honestly the best place to start. But in the middle is, what are the leaders doing? What are the senior executives? What are the managers doing? And realizing that truly what has made the difference between companies that succeed with innovation and defy the odds and the ones that kind of perpetuate the struggle is really how those leaders engage. So in the book, I have a framework I call it the ABCs of innovation, and it focuses on the architecture, so strategy, structure, et cetera. B is the behaviors. So, what are the leadership behaviors that are required? And then C is culture. And realizing that you have to be working on all three of those things all at the same time, but in different ways in order to be successful. And that's far more complex and challenging than I think we've given credit to.
Yeah. I love this quote where you said managers use things outside of their control as excuses. Leaders see them as challenges. Innovation leaders see them as opportunities. And I love this premise because that goes right into you're talking about these ABCs. And I
Mhm.
think that vantage point and even perspective and outlook when it comes to innovation are all really important parts. So, in that, you talking about behaviors or attitudes or culture or what have we allowed into the culture that's preventing us from innovating in the first place? What have we allowed into the culture where as soon as an innovative idea comes in, it almost is like organ rejection within the organization and it's kind of then tossed right back out. So we have $1,000,000 ideas that can't make their way through an organization. And so I like that you're kind of hitting this head on because it's a real issue that organizations deal with.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make is we treat innovation and operation the same when we show up as leaders. And what I mean by that is, think of yourself as a successful executive, kind of mid high level in the organization. Because you've been successful, you know what's going on, right? Like people come to you with questions, they ask you for decisions. You can confidently make that decision because you've been there, done that. You can anticipate cause and effect. You know what questions to ask in response. And it's a very different world. It's a world that, as Rita McGrath from Columbia University says, is very high knowledge, low assumption.
Mm. Hmm.
Innovation is the exact opposite. It is high assumption, low knowledge. You've never done it before. You can't anticipate cause and effect. You don't even know the right questions to ask. And yet, as managers, as executives, we show up and engage in the same behavior in an environment that is the opposite. And that's what leads to well, you may have $1,000,000 idea, but I need to see that $1,000,000 next fiscal.
Yeah.
you know, Prove to me that it's worth investing in this idea. And by the way, I need all the data that everybody has to show. I need the 5-year P&L. I need the NPV analysis.
Mhm.
And so we apply the same rules and structure and expectations from operations into the opposite world. And so that's one of the things that I say in the book is that because innovation is the opposite, leaders have to do the opposite of their instincts, which is really, really hard.
Taking so many notes. It's so good. I love what you said around high knowledge, low assumption, and then really for innovation, you flip that. And so I think that is so hard. And I know I don't want to get into anything we talked about last time because people have to go back and listen to that one.
Yes.
But we did talk a little bit last time about this idea of so how do you solve it, right? Do you solve it
Mhm.
through an innovation department? Man, then they become siloed and there
Yeah.
becomes so many issues with that. But then if you don't, solve it that way, does innovation even really get done? Or do we start kind of lowering our lens on the need to innovate because at the end of the day, there's all these fires to put out anyway? I think there's this tension and it feels like there's some probably good principles that move people closer without having to say we've got to rip everything out and start over, rethink it. How can people start maybe slowly moving towards this if they don't have the appetite to say let's just overhaul everything?
Yeah. So first off, it's not an either or. Companies tend to either be like, as you said, here's the innovation team and they are siloed and protected and nobody talked to them. Or companies are like, everyone's an innovator.
Right.
And it's somewhere in between. And it's an
Mhm.
evolution. So first off, just kind of get out of the either or mindset. Second is, and it sounds so both simple and academic, but it's so, so critically important, is defining innovation.
Mm.
If I guarantee you get 6 people in a room, you will have 8 different definitions of innovation.
Yeah.
And even next level down, define different types of innovation because you'll discover a lot of times with core or incremental innovation, which is making things, better, faster, cheaper, maybe a different scent, a different color. People are already doing that and recognize that. It's the stuff that's further out that may need a dedicated team. So, just getting clear in the language that we use and the different types of innovation and acknowledging that. And then kind of starting the slow migration to, okay, should we have an internal innovation team? What does innovation need to deliver in order to kind of justify its existence, in order to be a true business interest? And kind of evolving from there to eventually, over the course of years, building that innovation culture.
Yeah. That's good. I like what you said there, which is, hey, it's probably already happening. Let's
Mhm.
slow down, recognize and celebrate those people that are already doing it.
Yes.
And they're probably going to be the tip of the spear to help you do more of that. And I love that
Yeah.
because that's so real. Okay, I have to know, what's your favorite chapter of this book that you felt like, man, if you are one of those people that has 50 books out and is only gonna read one chapter of my book, what chapter is the chapter?
Ooh, there's so many. The one that comes to mind, and and I feel like I'm cheating, but I'm gonna cheat, is the book is organized into years, and each
Mhm.
year starts with the story of an innovation leader. So it's Hope, Faith, and Victor. And their stories are my favorite because they are, in a lot of ways, case studies, but they're based on real people that I have worked with. So this isn't a fairy tale by any means.
Yeah.
Um, but these are real people doing real work. And to see how they go about their journey each year and what they're able to accomplish and the very, very real resistance they face. I think it's just incredibly inspiring. It was inspiring to write about them, to work with them. And I think it's inspiring to read about, you know, this isn't all rainbows and unicorns. This
Yeah,
is really hard, but people are successful.
I love that. What would you say was, like, the hardest chapter to write and why? What did you wrestle with the most and why?
Culture,
Yeah.
especially the year one culture,
Mhm.
because culture is like this amorphous blob.
Mhm.
And all the places I've worked in the past, it's like, oh yeah, and culture. Okay, now let's talk about this other thing because nobody quite gets it and like knows how to articulate it. It can't be quantified. So I actually had to do a lot of research to
Mhm.
really understand, okay, what is culture? What are the different takes on culture? What builds culture? And I was surprised both by, some of the research that I read from like the 1970s. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great and fantastic. Like, here are like the 10 tools that a founder has to build a culture. It's like, why is no one using this as a checklist? This is so true. And then also reading, much, much newer research around how cultures evolve.
That's I mean, so much of the innovation journey is culture, and so much of business transformation is culture. It's interesting to hear how challenging it is for all of us, even people that do this work, to actually define it when it's time. And it's hard because, you hear things like, "Well, you know it when you feel it," and you're like, "What does that even mean?" And so I love that you put some skin on it and put some boundaries around it so that we could think about it thoughtfully. It's interesting when you were talking about culture. This past week, I was meeting with a leader and we were looking at a swim lane, and on it we had people, process, and systems. And I could be wrong, but it seemed like he was getting a little teary eyed. And I was like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "I've never seen a swim lane with people in process." He's like, "People either have process and systems, but the people part is so often left out of the whole
Mhm.
equation." And that's such a big part of change, right? Like, how
Huge.
does change even get through an organization? It's always the people. They're
Yep.
always last. We think
Yep.
about them last, we don't include them in the process, and then we're surprised when they're almost unwilling to go on the change journey with us. And so much of the work that you're doing is helping people change their mindset so that they can change and transform their business. But
Mhm.
man, is that hard to
Oh,
really put your arms around it. Yeah.
it's so hard. And it is. It truly is. It's all about people, and each person is different. So that's why I kind of, when the call comes in, like, let's build a culture of innovation. It's like you don't have one culture. There are multiple cultures within an organization, and all the way down to kind of the individual team level. And then you have the people and everyone. I often think of the change curve,
Yes.
which kind of learned as the 7 stages of grief, but the change
Yes.
curve, and everyone's at a different point.
Mhm.
And so it is incredibly complex. And so that's why it's like, we've got to wrestle with this, and we need to come up with some heuristics. So one of the things that I say in the book and that I truly believe is that culture comes from repeated behaviors,
Mhm.
because it really, like, growing up, actions speak louder than words. Mom was right. And as a leader in the organization, people are looking at what you do every day. And
Yeah,
that carries infinitely more weight than what you say, at a monthly or quarterly town hall.
that's so good and so real. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about innovation fatigue.
Yes.
I love this word. It's so real, right? We were just talking to a leader about all these changes that they personally are going to make. And my question was, have you zoomed out and looked at all the changes the organization is making this year? And then when you start stacking all of those on top of each other, it's not just your change or your transformation or your innovations, it's everyone's. And so organizations are just in general very fatigued. They're having to do more with less, and
Mhm.
they're being asked to go on all of these different change journeys or innovation journeys all the time. I would imagine we do similar work. Sometimes we walk in a
Yep.
room and there's 5 people that are a little skeptical about the
Little.
journey, right?
Yep.
How do you deal with some of that skepticism and help them realize that, they can begin again? Maybe they've been burned in the past, but that they can begin again with the idea of innovation and having that fatigue be such a real thing.
Yeah. I think first off, it's super important to acknowledge it. And, just call it so many organizations I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen too, are like, oh great, another management flavor of the month. Oh great, another hackathon. Oh great, another Shark Tank.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, I get you. And quite honestly, you have every right to feel the way you do. And then you need to give them a reason why this time will be different, and one that they will believe, because there's so much cynicism. If you're like, no, 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 but this leader is really committed. They're like, yep, heard that one before. And so you have to get into, what is the real business reason? Because people know, like, if there's money tied to it, if there's, competition tied to it, it will continue. If it's just somebody's passion, I'll be like, I'll just wait till that person changes.
Mm.
So you've got to give them something real from a business standpoint to prove that this time will be different, and then show them the plan of how this time will be different. Because you've got to win them over right away. Otherwise, they'll just wait you out.
Yeah, and that's honestly what I see in a lot of organizations is the waiting of each other out, and it's interesting because these organizations are formed around visions and missions and values, and then you see people operating in ways that hurt the organization, and that's very, very hard to see when it's like, "Right, but I'm not gonna do what would help my organization because so
Mhm.
and so did this, that, and the other, and so I'm waiting them out." And it's hard to hear, it's hard to see, because you realize, okay, you're not just hurting so and so or yourself, you're hurting the entire organization. That's hard. I mean,
It's
that's a hard
hard.
one to navigate. But I like what you said around incentives. And one of the programs that we had in my early days, there was a major incentive to a competition we had where the top 5 people won a monetary reward and the number
Yep.
one person got to quit their job and actually go run the business unit.
Huge.
And that's a major, like, they're putting skin in the game with the
Yeah.
person that wins, and I really love everything about that because, like you said, people move towards incentives, especially
Yep.
in US culture. I was just reading something the other day that said, what did it say? Something to the effect of, like, if you are in a culture in the US where you get into a group, typically most people lay back because they think nobody's gonna recognize my particular, because 'cause we're an individualistic society, right? But when
Very
it's
so.
yeah, but when it's in, like, another society, let's call it a European society, they're more likely to lean in because they know that collectively their efforts will all be acknowledged. But unfortunately, here in the US, not so
Nope.
much. So if I don't have an individual accolade, monetary, goal or even a promotion after this, I'm less
Mhm.
likely to go on that journey because, okay, I did all these other initiatives or efforts before and people just stole my ideas or didn't listen, whatever the reason, you have to be able to back that up.
Yeah, and that's so critical, and I love the example you gave, because so many companies with the best intentions will set up that hackathon or that Shark Tank or whatever, and people pour their heart and soul into it. They get excited because finally they have a venue for their ideas, and then the event ends and nothing happens.
Yeah.
And that is the shortest pathway to cynicism. And so the fact that your organization is like, no, we're putting our money where our mouth is, and we are giving big financial rewards. And we're actually, the winner, we're going to sponsor you, take you out of your day job. Instead of so many companies like, you can continue working on this like in addition to your already overflowing plate, like
Right.
how is more work a reward?
Right.
Um, but taking someone out and be like, no, we really believe in you. We believe in this idea. Go.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah. It's a game changer. And so I love this conversation because if someone's listening saying, "How do I create an environment that's more innovative?" I want them to hear that, your field guide, real
Mhm.
stories, real people, it's going to help
Yes.
with that, but also really think about really rewarding people for their ideas and not just grabbing them and running with them, leaving them behind or adding it to their already full plate, but how do we actually invest in them in a way where we're not just voting on the idea, but also
Mhm.
the leader, and we're asking them to be the tip of the spear to run it. And I think that's really powerful. And then in addition to that, people were paid for their ideas, which was really cool. I mean, it was a once a year thing that we did, but it hits different when you're willing to
Yep.
invest in someone, and that's such a big deal.
Right. And it was a once a year event, but I guarantee, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, people talked about it for the rest of the year.
All year.
And it was probably something that came up in recruiting conversations. And
Mhm.
it came like, it's not just that event, it's the story that gets told after the event
Yes.
and how it sticks in people's memories and how it gets shared and spread. And when you invest, there's such a key word. When you really invest, you're telling a good story. You're helping people retell this good story. When you're just like, check the box, we had the event, let's go on to our daily life. You're giving people a different story to
Yeah.
tell.
It's so good. What final thoughts do you have for us? And then also include in that how we can find your book.
Yeah. So, final thoughts that innovation truly is a leadership challenge. And there are leaders who master the challenge. It never gets easier. You just get more adept at handling the challenge and anticipating the next challenge. But it's really hard because you have to do the opposite of your instincts. But it also is incredibly rewarding because you will change something, even if it's one person. So stick with it. You know, you have about 3 years to make things work. And this book was really designed to be that practical guide to get you through all 3 years.
Yeah.
So you can go to unlockinginnovation.co and download a free first chapter, give it a sample, and check it out.
Awesome. And then how can people find you? You're pretty active on LinkedIn.
I am active on LinkedIn, so you can always connect with me there. And you can also check out my firm's website, which is milezero.io.
Well, Robin, it's always a joy to spend time with you. A couple weeks ago was on LinkedIn and you happened to be in a webinar. I can't remember who else you were with, but I was like so excited to jump on for a bit. I think it was during lunch and just listen to your
Yep.
wisdom. It's always so great to hear from you.
Oh, I thank you. It's so great to see you again.
Awesome. Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Remember, don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Thank you for joining us for the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Innovation Meets Leadership, and visit our site at innovationmeetsleadership.com for more innovation resources.
Hey, my new book is out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation. Click on the link to learn more. And don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.